Hello my friends, and welcome to the third video in my series of extremely fun and powerful DLC builds. Today we are going to be checking out the Smith Script Great Hammer. With the introduction of Smith Script weapons, melee-based builds now have a really powerful, really reliable ranged option. And with the improvements and min-maxing I have brought to this particular weapon, you can do upwards of 10,000 damage in one attack. So, without further ado, let's take a look at how you can replicate my Strength Faith take on the Smith Script Great Hammer. There are four main selling points to this weapon, so let's cover them first. Firstly, and probably most importantly, is the fact that the heavy attack of this weapon will throw the hammer at your enemies. And when you fully charge a heavy attack, this is devastating, both against single targets and even against groups, as it will pierce through and hit multiple targets. Obviously, when doing this, positioning is key, and sometimes the hammer does have a bit of an arc to it, so it can be awkward to pull off at elevation where you're higher than your target or vice versa. But against bigger enemies, this is never a problem. And in almost every situation, this is definitely the way to initiate your engagements. It's such a crazy powerful way to start the fight, and even use throughout if you get a bit of distance between you and your enemy. Next up, we have chosen the Flame Art affinity, which allows us to get an insane amount of extra damage from our faith scaling. This also means the primary damage output is fire damage, which is really good for the majority of enemies in the DLC, as not many enemies are resistant to fire. However, a couple are particularly resistant. I'm looking at you, Mesmer, so for them you may want to change the affinity or use a different weapon. However, for the most part, because the Flame Art affinity does make this weapon deal the most damage, it's still the most beneficial to do, and because we have high faith, that means we have also unlocked a plethora of buffs and other really powerful faith spells to take this build to the next level. Before we continue, please allow me to take a moment to thank Bethesda, the sponsor of today's video, and tell you about a brand new installment in the Elder Scrolls Online saga, the Elder Scrolls Online Gold Road, which you can check out today using my link below. This new installment brings over 30 hours of new content to the game, and old school Elder Scrolls fans will be so happy to hear that this new story will bring us back to locations that haven't been seen since Oblivion. Gold Road continues the storyline that began last year in Necrom, and also includes a huge amount of new additions to the game, with just some of my favorites being the brand new scribing system, which introduces new unlockable skills to existing skill lines, which can then be modified to your liking, meaning your own playstyle is much more customizable than ever before. Also, let's not forget about the beautiful and sprawling landscapes of the new region Westweald, and characters including the all-new Daedric Prince Ithelia. So whether you're a long-time Elder Scrolls fan or you have yet to dip your toes into this incredibly rich and ever-expanding franchise, Elder Scrolls Online Gold Road is the perfect time to do so, and again, you can check it out using my link below in the description and the comments. Next up is the power of the running attack. This will also instantly throw your hammer. Now, admittedly, it doesn't do anywhere near as much damage as the charged heavy attack, but it's super quick and you release it instantly, which means it's great for picking off weak targets. And because it's a running attack, you will only stop for a very brief moment whilst throwing the hammer, and then you can continue moving again, meaning this keeps you really agile, really mobile, and not many enemies are going to be able to keep up with you if you just keep spamming this. And finally, as you can see, we have equipped the new Ash of War, the new Savage Lion's Claw. This absolutely wrecks face with thousands and thousands of damage. Also still applies the fire damage, which means it absolutely melts the likes of giant Miranda Blooms and, more importantly, the Scadutree Avatar. All of this together means that this Ash of War in particular is great at punishing enemies with long cooldowns in between their attacks, as you can see from me just deleting these rune bears without even getting hit. And because hitboxes in Elden Ring are so precise and so chef's kiss, whilst performing this attack you can and will jump over and avoid certain other enemy attacks. This means when you get to really learn new enemies' attacks, you can even use this Ash of War to dodge their attack and combine it with an instant punish. And one final important thing I should mention before we move on to the stats is where you actually get this weapon. It's really simple. From Morth Ruins, you just head northeast into the underpass of the mountain, follow that route all the way round to the west until you get to Lower Ra, and then go pretty much directly north until you get to Telu's ruined forge, and it is acquired in this forge. And just super quickly before we move on, in case that explanation wasn't quite detailed enough, here is a clip of me going from Morth Ruins to that forge at around 2000% speed. Now that you know more about the weapon, let's talk about the stats required to make the most out of this build. As I have advised previously, you should always go for 60 Vigor to deal with the DLC. Any less and you are just losing out on huge chunks of health. Any more and you are effectively wasting points because the incremental increases after 60 are so minuscule. Next up, Mind should be at least 20 so you can cast all of your favorite buffs and spells. I've put it up to 30 just because I had some extra levels. However, if you're a lower level than me, stick with 20 for now. Also Endurance at 35 so that you can comfortably wield this great hammer along with the armor set that we'll be using. Then all of your remaining points can go into Faith and Strength. Focus more on Faith as more of your damage will be coming from Faith. However, you could potentially stop at 70 because I believe this is the soft cap. And for Strength, if you do have a silly amount of levels left over, you want to go absolutely no higher than 66. I go 61 because I'm pretty much always using Godric's Great Rune, which brings me up to 66. Because when you two-hand a weapon, it will add an extra 50% virtual strength onto your stats, bringing your 66 up to the maximum of 99. So any points above this are literally just wasted points. Now that you know what stats you should be running, let's talk about the armor set. The armor set we'll be using is that of the NPC Rakshasa. Rakshasa can be fought in the Eastern Nameless Mausoleum. This area can only be accessed once you have used the ladder at the ramparts in Shadowkeep to progress down to the illusionary wall and then taken the coffin to the castle watering hole. From here, just keep heading south, and as you keep following the cliffs downstream, you will eventually come to the mausoleum. The reason we are using this set is because every single piece you wear increases the damage that you deal. However, the trade-off is it also apparently significantly increases the damage that you take. Now take this with a pinch of salt because I don't know if it's bugged or if it's just a lot better than they make it sound, because I feel like the extra damage you take really isn't all that much, especially when you have got a high Erdtree blessing, which by this point you definitely should. It should be almost maxed out. And to give you details and specifics, each piece of the set will increase the damage you deal by around 2%, maybe even slightly more from testing, for nearly a 10% damage increase when wearing the full set. This, combined with all the talismans that we'll be talking about in just a second, significantly increase the damage output of the throwing attack of the Smith Script Great Hammer, which make this build devastating from all ranges. And as we move into the next section, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming guides and build videos, along with all the other incredible Elden Ring content I've got lined up for you. Also, once you're subscribed, make sure YouTube hasn't once again turned off the notifications, because I know a lot of people have been missing my videos for a day or two and then accidentally doing things that they shouldn't be that I could have helped out because they weren't receiving notifications. So make sure they're turned on so I can let you know when I upload. And finally, for those of you that already have, you are incredible. Thank you so much. Anyway, with that gushy nonsense out of the way, let's talk about the talismans for this build. First and foremost, the most important one, the Axe Talisman to enhance your charge attacks. This means all of your hammer throws will deal an extra 10% damage. And this one is looted in a cellar underneath the Mistwood Ruins in Eastern Limgrave, right nearby where you meet Blythe for the first time. Next up, arguably just as important, is the brand new Smithing Talisman. This will give you another 10% increase to your damage, specifically for weapon throwing attacks. So this not only will help with your charged attacks, but will also help with them running attacks as well. And all of these extra boosts and buffs we are giving this build stack. So with the Rakshasa set, with the spells and incantations we'll be using, the Axe Talisman, the Physick, the Smithing Talisman, all of these are stacking and stacking and stacking, giving us over 3,000 attack rating when all is said and done. And this talisman is looted from a corpse in the ruined forge Starfall Past. Next up is the Fire Scorpion Charm. This one increases your fire damage by 12%, and we are going to be doing a hell of a lot of fire damage. It does increase physical damage taken by 10%, but you're not really going to be taking much physical damage because most things will melt before they even get to you. And any boss that does pose a threat usually deals another form of damage, be it magic or fire damage from the likes of Relana or Mesmer, or holy damage in the form of Promised Consort Radahn. So this extra physical damage we take really doesn't matter all that much. And the Fire Scorpion Charm is found in the upper ramparts at Fort Lythe in Mount Gelmir. And finally, we have got the Ritual Sword Talisman, which will increase your attack power by yet another 10% as long as your HP is at maximum, which for the most part it usually will be. And this is due in part to a spell that we'll be using that I will touch on in just a second. And you can get the Ritual Sword Talisman pretty early on in the game. As soon as you progress to Altus Plateau in the base game, just head over to Lux Ruins, which is roughly between the two different entrances to the area, so it doesn't matter whether you've come via the lift or the ruin-strewn precipice. Once you're here, head down into a basement room and you can face off against demi-human Queen Gillica. Once she's defeated, head into the room behind her and loot this talisman from the chest. And just before we move on from talismans, another one I wanted to mention to you, just in case you didn't know about the power of this one, is the two-handed sword talisman. This will increase the damage of two-handed normal and heavy attacks by 15%. There are quite a few exceptions to this, such as the fact that it doesn't work with paired weapons, so weapons that split into being two-handed even if you're just using the one copy, such as the Star Scourge Greatsword. However, surprisingly, what it does work with is all Smith script attacks, including the throwing charged heavy attack from the Smith script Great Hammer, which makes this talisman potentially even more powerful than the likes of the Fire Scorpion Charm. Please note this does nothing for Ashes of War, so if you choose this over your Ash of War, then your Ash of War could be significantly weaker. However, especially against enemies that are resistant to fire, the two-handed sword talisman could be significantly better than the Fire Scorpion Charm, and is definitely another alternative to keep in mind. Now let's have a look at the mixed Physick. These are both pretty self-explanatory, no-brainer options. Firstly, you've got the spiked cracked tier. This is going to mean charged attacks do 15% more damage for 3 minutes. Absolutely insane, absolute must-have for this build, and that is found on an altar next to the minor Erdtree in Mistwood, along with the green spill crystal tier. And next we've got the flame shrouding cracked tier, which is going to increase your fire attack damage by 20% for 3 minutes. This one is dropped by the putrid avatar found at the minor Erdtree in Caelid, east of the smouldering church. And both of these tiers combined are going to make your already insane damage output even more crazy. As for the spells, we have got 3 absolute must-haves. Again, as always, you know I'm going to recommend these two, Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. Both of these, especially Flame Grant Me Strength, are going to be insanely good with this build because we're already dealing tons of fire damage, so Flame Grant Me is going to make you deal even more. With both of these two on, plus your mixed Physick, your Ash of War can now easily deal 11,000 plus damage with just one single cycle. And the next one I'm going to recommend is the Blessing of the Erdtree. This is found at the Queen's Bedchamber in Lanedale Royal Capital just before you fight Morgoth. And with this buff, you will regen 12 health a second for 90 seconds for a total of 1,080 health. This is absolutely fantastic when compared with the Ritual Sword Talisman. This will help to keep your HP topped off so you've always got that buff active without needing to waste a healing flask if you've only just taken a tiny bit of chip damage. The other spell I would recommend is Flame Cleanse Me, always great to have on your action bar just in case. And finally, because we have gone for a very faith-heavy build, and by the time you finish building your character, you will probably have 80 plus faith, you can then just mix in any other powerful spells that you like. As I talk about some of these spell options, I'll show you some footage from my Black Knight Greathammer build, because I employed a very similar strategy here. I love using the Frenzied Flame Seal because it has fantastic incantation scaling. It is also one of the few weightless items in the game, and it buffs Madness incantations, which are already some of the most powerful in the game. So you can pair this with the likes of Frenzied Burst and Unendurable Frenzy, and you now truly do have options for every single enemy in the game. If you want to snipe an enemy before you start charging up your hammer, you can use a Frenzied Burst first, because the range on it is just insane. And if you've got a really big group of tiny little enemies you want to deal with, Unendurable Frenzy is your best friend. But don't just use them two spells, you have every single faith spell at your disposal, because your faith is going to be so high. And as we're wrapping up this video, my friends, I'd just like to remind you to use my link below to go and check out Elder Scrolls Online Gold Road. So really have fun with this section of the build. You can make this build as wild and crazy as you like. And with that, the only other thing I will say is if I haven't been as clear as I could have been on any of the points, please let me know and ask your questions in the comments. I'll be more than happy to answer them. I believe I have been thorough with every single point, but there is so much to cover on these build videos that occasionally I forget something. Either way, let me know what you think of this build. Let me know what build you're currently running, genuinely interested. And with that, all that's left for me to say, my friends, is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.